finally, we've arrived at the bottom for the last few games. At the top here, we've got Twilight Imperium. Now, this is actually the 4th edition of the game. I do own the 3rd edition, but I decided to pick up this one because it's my favourite game of all time. It is absolutely phenomenal. But unfortunately, it's just really difficult to get to the table because of, first of all, the time commitment, and also making sure you've got the optimum number of players to get the very best out of it. But I can tell you right now, this is one of the best experiences you can have in terms of board gaming. It is a tabletop masterpiece. And the thing is, it seems quite daunting, but it's actually not that hard a game to teach and learn if you have an experienced group. So if you're playing the game with people that are experienced, they will guide you through, and they will let you take your time. There's just so much going on in this game. It's one of these games where there's never a dull moment. Even when it's not your turn, you're always fully invested in the game. And even though the games can take up to 14 hours to play, it doesn't feel like that because you're so involved. So yeah, it's an amazing looking game. There's so much detail there. There's so much lore and background to all the different factions. They're also different looking. They've all got different abilities. There's the political phases and all the action cards. There's so many things going on. The only thing I would say is the combat system in it is really just chucking dice, and it's probably the worst part of the game for me anyway. But the rest of the game is just incredible. So if you ever get the opportunity to try this, please do not turn it down, because you will not regret it. It is one of the best experiences in the tabletop hobby. So Twilight Imperium, get it played if you can. Underneath that, we've got Eclipse. Now, Eclipse is very similar to Twilight Imperium, but it's more Eurocentric. So the game is more about building an engine and kind of managing your galactic civilization. Some people have said it's a bit like a spreadsheet. I wouldn't go quite as far to say as that, because you've got the combat in it. You've got customizing your ships with the different parts, which is really interesting. There is a bit of diplomacy there, especially with expansions. But yeah, it definitely is a wee bit of a drier experience when compared to Twilight Imperium, but it's still a really, really solid space game. It plays a bit quicker as well. The other thing as well is it's actually truly 4X, because you have that exploration in this, which you don't really have in Twilight Imperium. So if you want the full 4X experience, this is probably a better option. It's also undergoing a revision with the 2nd edition, so now would be a really good time to get into it. So yeah, that's Eclipse. If you're looking for a space civ game and you want an alternative to Twilight Imperium that plays faster, then it's a really, really solid option. Underneath that, we've got the 3rd of our space themed games, and that is Xia Legends of a Drift System. And this is basically a sandbox space game where you're going around and doing various different things to try and gain fame. So in it, you can become a merchant, you can become an enforcer, you can become a pirate, and all of these are viable strategies to getting fame points in the game. So you can play the game whatever way you want to play it. There's lots of dice chucking in it. There's it's full of randomness. So it's not a game that you really play to win. It's a game that you play to experience. And it can take quite a lot of time because you do all your actions on your turn. So there's a wee bit of downtime there, and turns can take a while. So it's probably better at lower player counts. But yeah, again, it's one of these games. It's a real experience. So if you're looking for something like Firefly or like Star Wars Outer Rim, the newer one, you want that kind of sandbox experience, then Xia is really great because it gives you the most variety, I think, of any of those games. If you're willing to put up with the random nature of the dice chucking. It's also a really nice production as well. So yeah, that's Xia Legends of a Drift System. Okay, over here we've got a couple more Euro games, and then another one that is a really kind of conflict heavy head-to-head game. So we've got Brass, we've got Birmingham, and we've got Lancashire, which is the kind of the reprint of the original. I'm just going to basically talk about these ones as the same game because they're very similar. Brass, just the Birmingham one, just has a few new mechanics. These are really excellent Euro style games, designed by Martin Wallace, although he had a couple of co-designers for Birmingham, but he did the original design. I really love his games. This one has got lots of really good things in it. It's got multi-use cards, it's got some kind of area control, it's got kind of building and industry, it's got manipulating the market, and again, it's a really deep game with lots to think about, but at the same time, it's not that difficult to teach or play because there are only so many actions that you can do. So it's one that you could introduce to someone who wants to take a plunge to some of the more deeper Euro games. Now these versions here, the reprints are absolutely drop dead gorgeous. The production is just phenomenal. They look absolutely breathtakingly, stunningly beautiful. The iron clays as well that you use for the money, they're like the weighed poker chips. They feel absolutely amazing. They've got a lovely finish. So they do make the boxes really heavy though. That's the only thing. But yeah, it's absolutely amazing presence on the table. So yeah, if you're looking for a really, really heavy, or well, not heavy, but a game that's quite approachable, but at the same time is really deep, then either of these Brass games, are just fantastic games to consider. So yeah, that's Brass. And finally at the bottom here we have Star Wars Rebellion. Now Star Wars Rebellion is another Fantasy Flight game. It is basically a two-player game, really. Similar to things like War of the Ring, where one player is going to control the Rebel Alliance and the other player is going to take the control of the Galactic Empire, and each of the sides have their own goal. So the Rebel Alliance basically wants to just fulfill objectives and try and keep the game going, and the Galactic Empire, the Imperial player, is trying to find the Rebel base and capture it, and once they capture it they win instantly. So it's like a cat and mouse game where the Rebels are all about guerrilla warfare and stalling, and the Imperials are all about crushing the Rebels as fast as possible and trying to find out where that base is. There's a wee bit of luck in there with the dice, when you're trying to resolve the missions, but generally speaking, most of the game is planning, so planning using these action cards and sending different, heroes and characters from the series on these missions and trying to get them to succeed. So there's lots of thoughtful play there. It's a really good head-to-head game. You can really try and get in your opponent's head and try and work out what they're doing. The combat system in the original base game wasn't great, but with the Rise of the Empire expansion, they changed it significantly, and as a result, the combat's a lot better. Still not the best bit of the game, but I quite enjoy the combat for what it is. But yeah, it's just an amazing, it is basically Star Wars in a box. If you want the full Star Wars experience, you're not looking for dogfighting like an X-Wing, or like a full-scale, a space conflict like Armada, or a skirmish thing like Imperial Assault. If you're looking for a full Star Wars experience in a box, like everything that happened in the movie happening in the game, then you want Star Wars Rebellion. It's also Fantasy Flight, excellent production, uses lots of assets from the franchise, so the cards look great. All the art's really brilliant. The components are great. They look like what you would expect them to, from the license. It is one of the best two-player experiences. Basically, if you want a game like Twilight Imperium, but a two-player version of that, an epic game, then Star Wars Rebellion is one of the best options for that. Okay, folks, and that is all she wrote.